Late last year, RZE Watches released their very first watch, the Resolute, which is a fantastic lightweight field watch, complete with a modern design and a titanium case. A little while later, they then followed that up with the Endeavor, a very tough modern diver, also with a titanium case. And this month, they're releasing their third watch, a tough Meca-Quartz Chronograph, also made with titanium. Perhaps you're sensing a titanium-based theme. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and today we are talking about the brand new RZE Valour, which, if it's not already, will be available directly on RZE's website, and I think they'll be available to ship later on this month. Now, I've seen a fair amount of Meca-Quartz chronographs, but I don't think I've ever actually seen one in a titanium case, so when they asked if I wanted to check this one out, I was eager to do so, as it seems to take RZE's modern design language and then put it into a lightweight chronograph with a very turtle-like case. And since RZE seems to be about making tough, ready-for-adventure watches, the Valour is coming with an ultra-hex coating for extra scratch resistance. I know that's a concern some people have with titanium-based cases. Now, the watch I have here is a prototype, so you have your standard warning about how there may be some differences in the final production version. But as far as I know, there aren't any planned changes. And as far as I know, the watches will be ready to ship later this month, so there can't be that many changes to be had. So what you see here is probably what you're gonna get. And with that, let's dive in. So as you can see here, the Valour is a little larger than the previous offerings. It's listed as being 42mm wide, but I think it's a little bit larger than that. With this case shape, it's pretty hard to measure it accurately, but I'm guessing it's going to be closer to 42.5, maybe even 43. Although either way, with the crown, it's 45.4. Now you're also looking at a 49mm lug-to-lug and a total thickness of 12.7, which does include both the case back and a domed sapphire crystal. So I think it is a little wide, but otherwise fairly standard for a moderate-sized watch. You're also looking at a 20mm lug width, that ultra-hex scratch-resistant coating, a Seiko VK64 Meca-Quartz movement, and 200 meters of water resistance with a signed screw-down crown. Which is nice to have, as this is a chronograph you won't have to baby. Although even with that, I wouldn't mess with the pushers too much while underwater. Now on the wrist it feels a little large and a little flat, because it kinda is. One of the things I noticed with this almost turtle-like case shape is that compared to some other watches, and even the Resolute, is that this one stays a little wider as you get out to the end of those lugs. And as such, I think it wears closer to a 43 than a 42. Yet despite that size, it weighs practically nothing. I think it's like 78 grams with its rubber strap. So while it might feel a little bulky at first, it is something that you can quickly get used to. And after a while, you even start to forget you're even wearing it. So ideally, I think the Valour is going to be for somebody who likes a larger watch, or just likes a larger presence, but not necessarily someone who likes the extra weight that usually goes along with it. Now the case itself is one of the coolest parts of the Valour, where with these integrated pushers, it looks kind of like a more modern, or maybe even a more industrial version of the Bulova Lunar Pilot. And one thing I want to commend RZE on is just how they integrated the design language from their other watches. This one is a little bit different than the Resolute and the Endeavor. It's definitely a little wider and a little more boxier. Yet when you put them side by side, you can tell that there's a similar design language and feel. Now, just like the Resolute and the Endeavor, this has a bead-blasted finish throughout. So not only is it beautifully smooth to the touch, but it also helps reinforce that tool watch look, as well as it acts as a blander backdrop to the jet black tachymeter, and that's something that really pops out at you when you first see this, and especially so on this white dial version, where it almost seems to be circling the dial like the outer ring of a bullseye. Now turning the watch over, you can see that the case back continues that bead blasted theme, and overall it's a bit simple and a bit utilitarian. The Valour also has a very cool side profile. From here you can not only see the drilled lugs, but you also get to see the multi-tiered effect as the case goes up, almost like a little wedding cake. And do remember that total thickness here is 12.7, but that is to the very center of that crystal, so it does get a little bit slimmer as you get to the outer edges of that case. Now looking at the right side, you can see that the crown is a little bit small, and it's really nestled inside those crown guards. It does have a great neural texture, but even with that, it is a little hard to get out. Although as this is quartz, it doesn't matter quite as much as an automatic. Now, as for the integrated pushers, I absolutely love how they look here. Since this is a Meca-Quartz movement, they still have that nice crisp response as you push them. Yet I think they blend in nicely to the overall design, giving the Valour a very sleek look. If it wasn't for the tachometer, I think at first glance you might not even know this was a chronograph. So this is one aspect of the watch that I really do love. And there's only one watch that I can think of that I think did this better, and that's a Filson chronograph I looked at a long time ago, which kind of took this idea a step further by having the pushers look like crown guards. It's a cool idea, and I haven't seen anyone else do it since. Now, as far as I know, there are going to be 3 different colorways at launch. You're going to have a black dial, a salmon dial, and this one, the Panda, which I think is officially going to be called Crusader White. And I, of course, like the Panda the best, which really shouldn't be any surprise. But what did surprise me is how much I like the blue highlights here. Not only the hands, but these small blue dots on the outer edge of the chapter ring, which is something I didn't even notice at first, as they're slightly hidden behind the rather tall applied indices. Those dots are also lumed, but we'll get to that in a little bit. One thing that I thought was interesting / odd is how the 2 subdials differ from each other. The 24-hour subdial has a blue hand, which matches the center seconds, yet the minutes elapsed has a white hand. Then there's also a little bit of a different design between the 2, where that white hand is also surrounded with some blue highlights. Now, I think this actually improves the readability and functionality of that subdial, yet as a whole I think it makes it look a little asymmetrical, almost like the Panda got hit in the face and now has a black eye on the left. Now, the dial itself is a very nice crisp flat white, which really draws a contrast to the black subdials as well as the black chapter ring. Square applied indices circle the dial, and these indices have a fair amount of height to them, really adding to the depth of the design, yet not a lot of contrast. They have a matte metal frame, which is then filled with white luminous paint, so they do tend to blend into the background. Now, while this does give the watch a nice cohesive feel, it does make it a little bit harder to read, at least for this specific colorway. Although one thing that does help readability is the very cool handset, which stretches across the entire dial. The white centers tend to blend in, but the metallic framing stands out nicely. There is a date at the 6, which lines up with the logo and a little bit of the text going right down the middle of the dial, which keeps everything nice and symmetrical. Generally, I don't like to criticize a logo, but I think this one is going to lose a few people, as its rather sharp and angular font looks a little odd being surrounded by a series of circles. It also stands boldly out against the white backdrop, looking even more like a superhero logo than previous versions. Yet despite all of that, I think it does work here, as that modern angular design seems to match the modern angular design of the case. Now, as far as the design goes, this isn't a classic Panda by any means. Yet it does share one thing that I love about Pandas, that they're somehow able to strike a balance between having a complex and visually interesting design, yet still be fairly clean and straightforward, which isn't something that a lot of designs can claim. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that there's no running seconds here, which is something I've seen on a few other Meca-Quartz designs. Which brings up a little bit of a philosophical question for those that don't like quartz. If you can't see a tick, doesn't really matter. Kind of like if a tree falls in the woods. So ponder that while we move on to the Lume. Now when it comes to Lume, this thing is a blue torch. And here you can see those little blue squares lit up at the outer edge of the dial, which is something I really like, as it almost looks like a reflection of the indices. Now from the comparison test, you can see that it not only looks great, but it also has staying power, as it outlasts not only a Seiko diver, but also its field watch sibling. So as far as Lume goes, I think this thing is excellent for any type of watch. Yet, it's hands down the best Lume I've ever seen on a chronograph. Heck, I wish my Hammy had this Lume. Now, as for the movement, we have a Seiko VK64 Meca-Quartz movement. If you're not really familiar with these, they're sort of a hybrid quartz mechanical movement. The overall backbone of the watch is still a quartz, but the chronograph still runs like a mechanical. So you kind of get the reliability of quartz, yet the movement and feel of a mechanical. And lastly, let's talk about strap options. I'm not sure if there's eventually going to be a bracelet option, but for now it comes with a pretty nice rubber strap. It has matching titanium hardware, as well as a quick release for getting it on and off easily. It's also pretty comfortable on the wrist, but other than that, there's not much else to say about it. Although I did have one little issue, but that's more to do with the watch than the strap itself. There's not a lot of clearance between the spring bar and the case here, which is usually only an issue when you're talking aftermarket straps, but here it does affect the stock strap that it comes with, as you can't fully rotate it and it does feel a little restrictive. It wasn't really a problem while wearing it, but it was definitely something I noticed. The Valour is one of the best Meca-Quartz chronographs around, with not only a unique design, but a quality above and beyond what I've previously seen. Of course, there's a corresponding price tag that goes along with that as well. Comparing it to other Meca-Quartz chronographs in the market, I think it is a little on the high side. But when you consider the quality as well as the materials used here, it is still well within reason. And I think comparable to some of the other high quality micros out there. So if you're looking for comparables, there are a number of other watches on the market. And first off, let's start on the low end with a couple of Dan Henrys, as well as a few Spinnakers and AV8s. Now, these all seem to be around $250, give or take, although it is worth pointing out that these usually come with mineral crystal and not sapphire. For watches that are probably closer in quality, you can also look at the Brew Mastergraph as well as the Yema Rallygraph, and both of those are right around the same price. Although probably the closest watch I found to the Valour actually comes from Boulder, and that's with the Venture Rally, which is a similar water resistance and is also made with titanium, and that they sell for about $299. So like I said, it's a little high, but still within reason. Now there is a lot to like here with the RZE Valour. I think RZE succeeded in making a very modern and unique chronograph, and one that's capable of going wherever you need it to go. Although for me personally, there is one thing holding the Valour back, and that's its size. Now I love the Resolute, and I really want to love the Valour. However, it really stays true to that 43.5mm width, and that's just a tad over what I prefer. Now, with its lightweight titanium case, you can comfortably and easily wear the Valour all day. However, I kind of question if I would consistently want to over some of the smaller watches I already have. And therein really lies the rub for me when it comes to the Valour. However, if you have a larger wrist or just love watches with a larger presence, then the Valour could be a good choice for you. I think everyone needs a good go-to quartz watch, and the Valour is exactly that. But what do you think about the RZE Valour? Let me know down below. Or if there's another chronograph you prefer, let me know that as well. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time. Until next time.